folks, to our next installment of Catching Up with various members of the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame, normally broadcasting from the Sessions family, the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame Museum, but we had to call a little bit audible today. So I'm actually here at my home, but joining me today is class of 2013, Mr. David Mathews of the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame. David, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Darren. How about yourself?
Hanging in there, just enjoying the view here from the second story of our house, and really appreciate joining us today. So David, what we asked a lot of the people this during the pandemic. How have you been able to get through these last maybe 6 months on and off court? Any hobbies that you've picked up? Are you cooking now? Is that the word on the street, or what exactly have you been doing the last 6 months during the pandemic?
Well, during the last 6 months, I've had cycling as a big part of my career has been cycling on the road to try to keep my legs in shape, keep my heart strong, things like that. Because whether we think about it or not as tennis players or as human beings, period, if your heart ain't pumping, you ain't doing too good. So I took to back when I was growing up at Columbus State in that area, down in Phenix City, Columbus, Georgia area. One of the world-renowned knee surgeons back then was Dr. Jack Houston, and a lot of pros would fly down to Columbus. And I'm like, well, it can't be more than like one flight a day into Columbus from Atlanta. So it's got to be an important person. So later, when I got to playing basketball for Columbus State, one of my assistant coaches got me out of the dorm one day and said, let's go over here and visit one of my friends. I said, okay, well, let's go. And I had no idea who his friend was. He was from South Carolina area. And we get over to this, room where his friend had just had knee surgery. And I looked beside me, and the crutch that was beside the door was taller than I was. And I was like, wait a minute, this is a guy's armpit. This right. is, I'm walking into a giant's room. Well, it was Tree Rollins. And okay. I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, yeah, exactly. And, Tree played for the Atlanta Hawks for many years, big shot blocker and everything. But sure enough, that afternoon, he had just had surgery that morning. And Dr. Houston says, I got something for you. You can get over here on this exercise bike and start rolling it, going around. And I was like, wait a minute. If you want to get on the bike after surgery, what would happen if you got on it before surgery? Right. Could you keep your knees in better condition? So long-standing, even when I moved to Denver for 3 years back in the mid-'80s, cycling has been a huge part. So when the pandemic hit, there's this new interactive program called Zwift, and it's basically you set your bike up in the garage on a really high-end, not high-end, but there's some low-end too, money-wise, trainers, and it simulates if you're going up a hill, it gets harder. The bigger the grade, the harder it gets on your trainer. And I've been cycling on there sometimes 4 and 5 hours a day. And since the pandemic hit, I dropped about 25, 30 pounds. So I've been doing, physically wise, been doing really well. With tennis wise, we shut down at Buford for about the last half of March through April, and we cranked back up again on smaller scale. We're just limited class sizes so we can space really well. We washed the tubes down that we let them pick up balls with. We're under a no touch. Still, we try to do no touch with all the students. So I'm the only one touching the balls when I feed them. But when we pick up, they pick up with tubes, and we wipe down the tubes after every class. And, each student, Dan, will have one tube for the whole class, and that's your tube. And when it's over, I wipe it down with a disinfectant wipey, and the next class comes in, and we space them out. So it's gotten back. Our class size is not quite as big, but it's getting better.
Hey, you dropped 25 pounds during the pandemic. You have something in common with Bill Ozaki, right? Well, he did the same.
That's what my wife said. She goes, you're an opportunist. I said, well, if I got time here at the house, I might as well get on that bike. And if Darren wants to call me, fine. I'm going to be on the bike while I'm riding and talking. So that's right. Okay. I'm not got to worry about cars and stuff. So that worked out a lot better.
Yeah. Well, good job. Keep up the good work with that. You mentioned Columbus, and that's kind of your upbringing, right? You were at You grew up, if memory serves me correctly, in Phenix City, Alabama, just on the other side of the bridge of Columbus. Columbus is such a great tennis town. With Corda, the award-winning CTA, Columbus State, a great tennis program which you played for when it was Columbus College. Can you talk about growing up in that part of the Southeast and how you got started with tennis? There's like a famous four-court facility, I think, that you played almost every day at. Maybe you can talk about your upbringing in Phenix City.
Sure. Back then, there were basically 4 tennis courts in the entire city. I think I didn't start playing tennis until I was about 13, maybe 13 and a half. I did it for 1 year during the summer, not 1 year, but I did it for 3 months during the summer. My mom was working on her master's in driver's ed for her. She was a special ed teacher, and she wanted to teach her students how to drive because a lot of them were helping support the family. So they're like, if I can get them a driver's license, oh my gosh, they could get to work and back, and the mom and dad wouldn't have to take that time out like a lot of us parents have to do. And so she was working on her master's degree for driver's ed at Auburn, and so she would drop me up at the 4 courts, and I would stay up there, and we had a little lunch money, and I'd walk up and get me a sandwich at lunch and stuff, and anybody come up, Darren would come up, and I'd say, hey man, you want to hit? And they had a little wall there that I would hit on, and I hated that wall because I was not the most consistent person in the world, which most beginners aren't. And then there was another wall up about, I don't know, probably 75 yards up the hill, but it was an old bowling alley, and they had left part of the wall of the bowling alley as a retaining wall for that upper. They have a pavilion up above, and that wall was a lot better for me because you could hit it 30 feet high and it wouldn't go over the wall like a lot of places. So that worked out a lot better. I like to hit overheads. I'd hit how you hit your overhead down in the ground and then it would ricochet back up and come back up. I'd hit overheads for days. And so she dropped me off there. And after that first year, that first summer, I think I was 13, 14, about ready to get out of middle school. And I met this one of my classmates. I didn't even know she was a classmate. I mean, you're in your own little world when you're 13, 14. Some of you kids in school, but not a lot. I didn't. This girl says, hey, you ought to go out for the high school team, when you get in the 9th grade. Well, I think we were maybe 7th or either 7th going into 8th or 8th going into 9th. And I was like, we'll see. I'll just keep practicing and things. Well, later found out she was #1 player on the high school team and was our valedictorian, and then went to Auburn, played at Auburn and was valedictorian there and #1 player for 4 years. So she was a pretty good player.
Sure.
A really good friend of mine. She's a doctor, PhD and stuff at Memphis State now. But, my mom wanted to hit some balls after school. She was a school teacher, wanted some exercise. And the boys club that I grew up in built 1 court by this creek. And she was like, hey, let's go to boys club. It's right by the high school where I teach. We'll get out, go there, play for an hour, come home, blah, blah. And that worked out great. But, sooner than later, I got a little bit better than, she was. And she's like, hey, you need to go up to the park and play with somebody. And I was like, well, who's up there? Well, she just dropped me off. And so literally, some of the older gentlemen there, I remember Mr. Cliff Farah, who the tennis center that they built after it wasn't before I left. I think while I was still there, maybe at Chattahoochee Valley Community College, they built an 8-court facility on one of the runways of the old airfield there by the Roy E. Martin Recreation Center at Idlehour Park. They basically built 8 courts, and they've named that facility after Mr. Cliff Farah. And Mr. Cliff Farah was a big advocate for tennis in the area. He used to always play with a cigar, which I never knew why. And then I realized that when I was about 18 that mosquitoes don't like cigars or cigar smoke. So I was always on Mr. Farah's team. I was like, oh my gosh, I could play tennis. And there was a creek right beside our 4 courts. So if your ball went over that fence, you're done. You're down to 2 balls now because we go in that creek, no doubt. So, just a great little area. I would always venture over into Columbus to play some tournaments. Or I think when I was 17, 18 years old in high school, I got a job at Lake Bottom Park there in Columbus. They had 6 clay courts, and it's literally probably not more than about 400 yards from Columbus Country Club. But it's a little public facility there, and right down the hill from Columbus High School. And I would go over and water the courts down with this high pressure hose at like 6 in the morning, flood the courts, and by 8 o'clock when they opened, that water was gone. I mean, the gravel up under those clay courts must have been really something special, because when it rained, everybody knew in Columbus, if you wanted to get a match in, you had to go to Lake Bottom right after it rained real hard, because Lake Bottom was going to dry first. And the back 3 courts were like, I got court number 5, 6, 4, 5, or 6. And they're like, oh my gosh. But so I grew up there in Columbus, Phenix City, and played a lot of tennis. And it was really good. It was before, I think Cooper Creek at that time now has, I don't know how many, 35, 40 courts.
Amazing.
They had 12. We had 12 with that little bitty shack that by those, when you drive in on the right side of the road, that little bitty building was the pro shop. Right. And there were 6 and 6 right beside it, and that was all that was there. And it was a lot of fun. Roger Pierce, I played with Roger. I know Roger very well. He's down there at the tennis center. I see him every time I go down there. But it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun going up in that area.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for you probably, it's absolutely amazing to see what Cooper Creek has turned into. I mean, it is arguably the best public clay court facility in the country. I'm not on the top Absolutely. Of my head. I can't think of anything. I mean, I'm sure there's a few that are equal, but I can't. Sure. With the beautiful building and now with the 12 hard courts for Columbus State, right. Just an amazing place. So well, going back to your overhead story, everybody I've talked to said you have one of the greatest serves in the history of the state. Is that maybe where was that your technique that you used to try to perfect that? It's the same motion.
Well, it's kind of funny. I grew up, back in I guess that would be like the late 60s. Tennis was not, it was on the radar, but it wasn't quite on the radar yet. It was coming along. And so I played the big 3, football, baseball, basketball at the boys club that I grew up at. And so, at Dixie Youth, I was a shortstop. And so my coach, I'm going to give a shout out. I don't know if he's still living or not. Mr. Varner Head was just a grind of a coach. His philosophy was, if you lost a game, your next practice had to be more intense, or you're practicing a losing way. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then there were days when going to practice was, 15th on my list of things I wanted to do. But my dad always taught me, you made a commitment, you go and you finish the commitment. And if it was the wrong commitment, then you make an adjustment after the season. You don't let people down. You finish the season and you keep going. So that, I later found out from Mr. Head that the Dixie Youth League there in Phenix City does it a lot like Major League Baseball. They give, if Darren is a coach, they give you X amount of points per season. You can trade the points with another player. I mean, it's almost like money, but it's a point system. And so when you go out to tryouts, you're looking at people and you're putting a point value on them. Their skills is fielding, is hitting, and things like that. And then they wage wars. They bid for every player that's out there trying out. And I found out that the average player normally was about 200 points. Just, could field decently well, hit decently well, and all that. Well, he got me for 50 points. Well, within a year and a half, I was an all-star shortstop, because they called me Mr. Eureka, because a ball hit up the middle, it wasn't going to be a base hit. That was mine. And I would throw you out at first base. I had a cannon for an arm. So a lot of my throwing was Mr. Varner Head hit me ground balls in practice, like, 75 in a row. And I'm throwing all the way over to first base. And, don't dare miss your throw. Don't dare miss your first base. You better hit him on a line drive, or you going to second base where the throw's a little shorter. And I'm like, I ain't going to second base. And he goes, well, you better get some arm. So a lot of that, the throwing motion was driven from, Mr. Head at Dixie Youth Baseball. It just transferred right over into hitting overheads off that wall. The big thing I tell all my kids hitting overheads is that probably 80% of it is judgment. You judging A, where it's coming down so you can intercept it, and then B, you got to be ready, but you got to have a throwing motion. If you don't have a throwing motion, and that's one of the biggest things that I see with taking PE out of the curriculum, from back when I was in school to, even not to now, but I know back several years, I've got two daughters that are now mid-20s. They only had like 2 30-minute PEs a week. And I'm like, how are you teaching these kids basic movement skills? Not just hitting a tennis ball or, doing a bow and arrow. None of that, just basic throwing skills or running skills and things like that. That suffers. I've had some of my kids be 17, 18 years old, and riding a bicycle is a foreign object. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't fathom growing up without knowing how to ride a bike. I mean, that's balance skills that you learn in there, your equilibrium and all that. So, it definitely helped, along the way. But, baseball was my start. I played a little football, I wasn't a quarterback or nothing, but the team skills really helped me establish, camaraderie with not only opponents, but also with just people in the sport itself. And that, you treat people how you want to be treated, whether you win or lose. And that's a hard nut to swallow for a lot of people. But life goes on whether you win or lose. It doesn't matter. So it does matter, but it doesn't,
Ain't that the truth? Yeah, it's up for our 3 little ones we have here. I mean, we started them very, very early on the balance bikes. And so like my 4-year-old son, by 2.5, he was riding without any issues, pedals, and people were like, how did that happen? I'm like, well, it's just brilliant parenting, what it is. But
yeah.
but you're spot on. I mean, the balance bikes are a great tool for little kids because that's their fear, that they're once they conquer that, it's over. But anyway, so you moved on, had a nice college experience at Columbus College, now Columbus State, which now is of course a Division II powerhouse, led by Evan Isaacs, great coach over there. But you really made your mark, David, in the senior tennis for USTA, and on the screen we have a couple things about David's past, and one of them was, you're an 11-time national champion. That's 11 more than I've won, although I'm preparing for the men's 90s. That's my goal. But really, all 4 surfaces, which very few people have done. Did you have a favorite surface of the 4? Maybe indoors, given your game style?
Well, I mean, I can't deny being a server volleyer, and I know that's old school, and it's looked at in today's world like, oh, you can't do that. And I go, well, you kind of got to have the tools to do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, but you may not be able to do it all the time. But there's definitely a place in today's game for serving and volleying. But I liked grass, obviously, because we don't get to play on it much, and the novelty of it. People go, oh, yeah. I say, yeah, I played grass court tournament for 10 years straight, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I mean, to me, grass is very similar. I met my wife on a volleyball court. It's similar to a degree to volleyball, because volleyball, you can't let it bounce. So when I go play on grass, if you let it bounce, you're asking for trouble, because you never know what kind of bounce you're going to get. I mean, most time it's a pretty good bounce, but that one time it might be a break point that you're like, God, I had a good swing at that. Maybe I should have volleyed it. And it puts you in some difficult situations. But if you can make the volley, it's a lot better to make the volley than it is to let it bounce and not make anything. So that's to me is the fun. Yeah, I mean, when I started playing.
Go ahead. No, I was saying that's incredible. You've won titles on all 4 surfaces. There's very few professionals that have won all the slams. And sure. I'm not necessarily saying USG senior championships are the equivalent of winning Wimbledon, the US Open, but still it's the same concept. I mean, you have different skills at each particular surface, and you mastered all of them. So that's the tip of the cap, my friend. Well done on that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the weirdest part is the first one that I won was the one I thought I would, possibly never win, which was on clay. But and it was here in Atlanta. I think it was the in 89 or 90, somewhere in there. The first year they had the 30 national clay courts, and it was here in Atlanta. And I won the doubles with Mike Federley from California, and we weren't even on the slate together. He just showed up. I had just played him a month before in the 30 grass courts in Santa Barbara, and he beat me in the semis, like 6-6, 2 tiebreakers. And he showed up here, and I think his doubles partner backed out on him at the last minute. And he saw that I was in the draw, and I told him out in California, we talked a couple of times, that I said, you gonna come to Atlanta? Yeah, I think so. And I was like, okay, I'll see you there. Have a good night. And I really wasn't planning on playing doubles at all, because I was gonna play my singles match, which was normally done by about 12 or 1 every day, because they try to play everybody early, like between 8 and noon or 1, and
right.
Then you come back with doubles in the afternoon. I was like, well, I just play singles and then go teach in the afternoon. That'll be, I'll be able to make my money back a little bit. And second round, he shows up at my court, and he goes, I just heard the number like 5 or 6
right.
seeded team backed out. And I just talked to the tournament director, and he said, if you'll play, he knows that I beat you in the semis out there, but we're at least a seeded team. And I was like,
right.
yeah, we're probably 6 or 8. And he goes, okay. And they put us in, and we beat a seeded team in the next round like 0-1, and they were madder than mess. They were like, what in the world is this guy doing in this? And that's, matter of fact, that's a tournament that Evan saw me play. And in my induction, Evan was on there talking about bouncing serves. And when I was 30, I was doing some serious hitting. I had just come off living in Colorado for 3 years. I'll give some kudos here. One of my good friends, whose son is about 25 in the world right now, Mr. Guy Fritz, his son Taylor Fritz is up the ladder. I met him in Denver, and Guy stayed with me for about 3 months in my apartment there, and we would work out almost every day, travel around the Intermountain region playing tournaments, and he really taught me how to hone my serve and how to place it at the right times and not just use the raw power. He's like, power is just going to kill you. And I was like, okay. And, and I listened to him, and we still talk all the time. When Taylor comes to Atlanta, he's always got me some tickets to get in there, and I'm sitting there charting Taylor's matches in between and texting him in between, games and stuff. And he's like, oh my God, this is too funny. But it's, that's, the senior tour definitely is where I blossomed, whether that was just because I matured by the time I was 25 or so. Some people do mature a little bit later, and maybe that was my case, that mentally I started putting things together. And now I try to get my kids to understand that a winning antidote with the right game and the right tools, after a while, does and can become very boring, because you get so good at doing what you're doing. I had a guy one year. I was in Palm Springs playing the USPTA international tournament out there at the USPTA convention, and I played a guy. I think it was in the finals, and I think I won like 7-6, 6-2, or 7-6, 6-3. But I didn't lose my serve the whole tournament, which is not a rare thing. I would go, long extended periods, and just because I focused just on that side of my game. And I figured that if me and Darren are playing and I can hold serve 6 times, I got a decent chance of winning the set.
Well, that's how that was Sampras's philosophy. Be honest.
That's right.
That's exactly right. I'm gonna make a couple returns. My opponent's gonna get tight. 6-3, 6-4. Thanks for coming.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I played this guy in the finals out there and beat him. And then we came here to Atlanta at the Senior Invitational, and I was playing him in I think it was the 3rd round or something. And I was up. I think I'd won the first set, and then the first game of the second set, he broke me, and it sounded like a party going off. Just woo! He was hooting and hollering, and I was just kind of walking to the net like, "What are you doing?" A, the match isn't over, and B, could you get out of my way so I can go get some water and a towel? I'm exhausted here. And he looked at me, and I just kind of looked back at him, and he goes, well, you can't feel bad for me because I finally broke your serve. And I said, and life goes on. And so I just walked around the net and wound calmly beat him 6-2 in the second set. And he looked at me, he goes, you weren't happy by getting broke. I said, you don't understand. That is a nightmare for me. I do not lose my serve. And when I do, the next time coming back out, I'm not going to be a happy camper. I'm going to really try to hold serve convincingly.
That's funny.
So, yeah, I guess I was notorious for having a pretty good serve, you know.
And then you got a chance to represent the U.S. right in some cup competitions, including winning the Dubler Cup, which is the men's 45 event. Where was it held the year you guys won? Do you remember?
The year we won was in Durban, South Africa, down on the far southern tip of South Africa. Yeah, it was about a 19-hour flight, and you can imagine a 6'5" guy in a sardine can for, you know, we thought we're flying into the Cape Verde Islands, which is right there off the northeast coast of Africa. We're flying from here straight there, and we're like, okay, you know, hopefully we can get out and walk up and down the concourse just for a few minutes. You fly in, they put some more fuel in, and you go right back up. You're going down to Johannesburg now. That's about another, I think, 7 hours or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be fit to be untied when I get off this plane. So, but it was a lot of fun. The one thing that I've been very happy and proud to be able to do over my career is all my doubles partners. They'll swear and attest to it that if Dave shows up for a tournament, you're going to find his wife, and you're going to find that if both my daughters were around, they were with us because we traveled. We were like a little group of gypsies. I figured early in my career I didn't play well if I didn't have my family with me, and so I just started taking them everywhere with me. And so when we went to South Africa, my girls just had a blast. We would go do our 2-a-day workouts for the first 3 or 4 days. And they would stay back at the resort and go around. And oh my gosh, Val Wilder was there, Mike Federley, and Egan Adams from Florida was there. And oh my God, we would come back in the evenings and go to dinner with everybody. And everybody wanted to hear what my wife and my 2 daughters were doing during the day because they were out, you know, going around the town and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. And they're like, aren't you scared? And I said, my wife and daughters, they're unabridged. They're going to go where they think that they're safe. You know, they're knowledgeable about their surroundings, but it was just a real blast. The tennis was, I thoroughly enjoyed playing and also watching. Besides a lot of the younger teams, I mean, I was in the 45s, the 35s. Andy, I can't remember his name from South. He's in South of North Carolina. Oh my gosh, that team was just. And then the team above me, we were all seeing each other every day, you know, courts next to each other. And the tennis was just unbelievable. There's a lot of fun, but a lot of good camaraderie between not only our teams, but all the South African teams and a couple of teams from Sweden. We just had a great time. It was, you can't, I tell people all the time to go to places like that and to know that me hitting a little bitty round 2 1/4 inch tennis ball got me the opportunity to go there it's hard to fathom. It really is. You know, you can pay your way there all day long, but to know that you're doing something good enough that people want you to come and do it there is, you know, that's just a compliment you can never overplay it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I played college tennis with Ross Duncan, who's from Durban. And now lives here in the U.S., plays a lot on the U.S. Cup teams. He's one of the best senior players out there. But and I've also been blessed. I've been a supervisor at a couple of those ITF World Senior Team Championships, and I love those weeks. I mean, and to your point, high level tennis, great camaraderie. I remember one year I showed up for the 40s. They put me in charge of the 40s, and the French women show up, and Sandrine Testude. I'm like, I think that's Sandrine Testude. I mean, I hadn't looked at the rosters yet. I'm like, yep, that's her. And she would literally look like 9 in the world, like 5 years prior to that. So they're just great events. So, but let's talk about maybe what you're doing now with the Dave Mathews Tennis Academy and your connection specifically to the Georgia Tennis Foundation for 13 years of absolute excellence in directing the YMCA outreach program. And the picture on the screen is one of those Many times you're out there with your sleeves rolled up, literally and figuratively, bringing tennis to kids that wouldn't necessarily have a chance to participate or experience the sport. I know that's really something that's very important to you. Can you talk about, I mean, how you got connected with the GTF for that, and maybe some of the things that you've learned from that program?
Oh, sure. I could talk for days, but I'll try to condense it down to a couple of minutes or so. Um, I think by me, I mean, my wife works at the Decatur Family YMCA. The associate exec and the exec then were, oh gosh, Jan Lawton was the associate exec, and Bill McCoy was the executive director there. And I think Bill was in charge of also the regional, I say like the Metro Atlanta physical ed department through all the YMCA. So he had connections out everywhere. They came in one time, and I can't remember exactly how it happened. I don't know if it was Evan or back then it was Nell Long, but they had reached out. You know, the Y has I don't want to say a captive audience, but they do. You know, with your summer camps that each Y ran, they would have, 100, 110 kids a week at each different Y. There's between 22 and 26 Ys in the Metro Atlanta area. So
Right.
they thought that, wow, why don't we see about maybe kind of getting some tennis into the summer camp program, whether it's early in the morning or maybe the first of the afternoon, because the kids are there. They're usually there by 8, 9 o'clock. They're usually starting to get picked up by, 4 or 5 o'clock. So it's somewhere got to be in there between about that 9 and 3 slot. And I was like, whatever. So, I think after the first year, they were pondering it over. And finally, I think it was probably Nell or Evan contacted Jan, and they said, because I think Jan or Bill were more, involved with trying to further the summer camp program process, just kind of more enrich the kids with things that they don't normally get. And she looked at me one day. I was walking in the Y to see my wife, and she goes, have you ever thought about running like introductory, tennis lessons to kids that normally wouldn't get it? And I said, I thought about it a lot. I said, my mom was a special ed teacher. I've helped with Special Olympics. I've done as much as I think I can do. And I said, what's on your mind? And she goes, well, we'd like to try to get it into the summer camp program. And so we sat down. Literally within a year, I just called up a couple of Ys that were close around. I think Eastlake was one, and maybe one downtown. And I said, let's try it this next year and see what happens. And literally, Darren, in about, I think by the third year, I started recruiting some of my students to help. And I mean, because literally we're talking sheer masses of kids, like we would have, like in Covington, which is where that picture's about, we would have usually about 30 to 40 kids, 3 or 4 sessions in a row. So basically, Darren, the camp counselor, would come in. I'd say, okay, we're here at 9:30. From 9:30 to 10:15, we got like the younger kids. We let them get out there when it's a little cooler. Then at 10:15 to 11 o'clock, we'll come in with another group, and then the third group. So, we're hitting about 150 to 200 kids right there in about a 2.5 hour span. And then we would load up, and Ken, the guy in the background of the picture, literally me, him, my 2 daughters that were then, upper teens. And I had a couple of other kids that kind of came and went. Then we would load up cars, and we could go from Covington, Georgia, all the way to Smyrna, Georgia. And that's about an hour drive, but we would stop and get us a quick sandwich and something to drink on the way, meet them at the next place in Smyrna at 1 and go from 1 to 3. And then I would go teach my academy kids from 4 to 6:30, and then adults from 6:30 to 8. And, my summer, I was wound and spent by the end of 10 weeks. But
I know the feeling.
You get up every morning, and sometimes when you got small kids, and I mean small kids could be anywhere between about 6 and about 12 or 13. sometimes your voice carries more weight to try to keep them under control. And so after about 2 or 3 days, by about Wednesday, my voice is just slammed. I'm teaching on fumes, not energy wise, but my voice wise, it was just, my daughters look at me and go, "This is kind of awesome. We can barely hear you."
Right.
And I'm like, "Oh,
Right.
God."
Now let's
Not
ask
a
him for the
good
car
thing, but
now.
that's right. That's right. That's right. But yeah, we got to where we were seeing about 1,000 kids a week. So roughly that was right at 9 to 11,000 kids in a summer. We did that for about 10 straight years. The program went for 13. And I mean, we would have camp administrators from every Y. We were going as far as Flowery Branch. We were sometimes we were going all the way to Covington. We were going all the way down to Griffin some years. I mean, it was just, but I looked at it as this is a way that can expand a kid's life. You don't ever know what little bitty guiding light you gave. If you don't give it, then there's no chance of it blossoming at all. And so we welcomed going any and everywhere that the Ys wanted us to go. There were some days, I know we went to Adamsville, which is over there on MLK, and their gym is just ginormous. We would load up every peewee net we had. I think we were carrying, there would be 2 cars full of equipment. I think I had about 6 nets in my car with baskets of balls and carts. And then another guy had just about the same, and we would have that whole gym basically just playing and hitting, and it was very exhausting after about 2.5 hours. But boy, when you walked out of there, you really sensed that you made a difference in somebody's life, and that to me was what it was all about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people, Dave, you were a huge part of that. Let's give you the credit here. Your enthusiasm, your dedication to that group of children is a legacy, and will live on in both the Hall of Fame and the GTF for forever. So we really appreciate all that you did for all those kids, and guarantee if you asked any one of them, they would remember Coach Mathews. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You mentioned one or two more things here. You mentioned Eben Hardy a lot today. And Eben was a huge part of your development, I think, in your life, and obviously a huge part of the GTF. Unfortunately, passed away a few years ago. We miss him every day here. Can you talk about the influence Eben had on you?
Oh, sure. When I got to Atlanta, I just moved here. My wife was finishing up. She was coaching volleyball at Metro State College in Denver. I got here in like January, February, and we had decided that we were going to move either to Southern Cal, which is where she's from, or I was going to move to the South. And I said, well, I'm going to try and go out and play a little, futures. Well, now they call it the Futures Tour, but that back then it was called Satellite Circuit. And a lot of pros base themselves out of Atlanta. So I can get in this Alpha League, I can play, I can work on my game, things like that. So when I got here, I didn't know at the time, I mean, being, 28, 9 years old, I didn't know, I didn't really care how old you were going out on the tour. I didn't know most of the kids were, 18, 20 years old going out doing it. Here I was 28, 29 doing it. And I didn't care. I'm hitting a tennis ball, and if you're not, then I'm winning. If you are, then we're gonna have a competition. And I saw Eben there back then. What's called now the Carl Sanders YMCA was Northside Athletic Club, and they started then. That had to be like 1980. I'm thinking maybe 87, 88, somewhere in there. And it might have coincided with the first year they started the 30 Nationals. I'm not sure, but it's in that ballpark of a time frame. The senior invitational was began, and they started inviting like the top 15, 20 guys out of each age division, from the USTA national rankings. Well, that year in 80, I guess that was 89 or 90, I was ranked, I think, 7. I had lost to Federally in the finals of the indoors. I had lost to, I didn't play the hard. I lost to Federally in the semis of the grass courts. And I lost in like the round of 16 in the clay courts here and got ranked 7. So I lost to the number 1 guy twice and lost to somebody else once and was 7. And I wasn't happy, but you're between your worst loss and your best win. And, that was okay with me.
Those days.
So, yeah, in those days, that was the way it was done. And so I'm playing the senior invitational, and Evan is there. He's on the not only the board, but I think he was also on the committee for my rank, whatever they call it, the cup that they invite players from. And so we're the same age, so we're seeing each other. And then one year, that must have been in '94, and we'd seen each other at tournaments and stuff. But you're coming and going all the time. You got things, he's got things he's doing, I got things I'm doing. We're playing. I don't think we ever played until maybe the mid '90s, but I go to play the senior invitational that year, and I think in 94, 93, 94, I was ranked 2 in the country. And
I was still in high school, by the way. I was still in high school.
Oh gosh, that's bad.
Had to get that in there.
That really shows my age now.
Good.
I think it was in '94. I think I was coming back as a number 2 player in the country, and I walked into the senior invitational, and Eben walked over to me and he says, I got to let you. And Eben had been a captain of mine on a couple of the senior teams, like the Southern Senior Cup, things like that. Yeah. And then, also the intersectionals they have out in Arizona a couple times. So, we'd obviously talked a ton. And he looked at me and I said, "What's going on?" And he goes, "I just got to let you know." He goes, you might be the first number 2 player to not be asked to play on a cup team." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, and why would that be?" And he said, "Well," he goes, "you're not notorious for winning on clay." And I said, and he said, and the surface that's going to be on is red clay in Germany. And I said, "Okay, so what are you saying, Evan?" He goes, he really looked at me. He goes, "You need to win this senior invitational."
Right. You need to win this week.
And I said, "Well, I have to let you know that my daughter, it was my first daughter at the time. Nikki was born in '93. So yeah, it was probably about a year later, it was about '94. I said, I have been on the Reebok slide in my living room, which is, a slide you go back and forth on. I said, I've been doing that for 45 minutes a day for the last 9 months to try to get ready for this year because 2 is not good enough for me." And he's looked at me and I said, "The problem is that I've been doing it with my 40-pound daughter in my arms for 45 minutes. He looked at me. I said, "So if I'm going to be ready, this is the year." And he's looked at me. I said, "So I guess I need to go to work." He said, "Yes, you do." Well, I won 4 matches in a row, didn't lose a set, and beat a clay court player in the finals in straight sets like 4-3, and got on the Italia Cup team that year. And from then on, me and Eben were, there was not too many senior cup events, whether it be the intersectionals or the, I can't remember the name of them now. The one around here. Yeah. Whether it was either one of those, he called me up. He would always, "Hey, you want to play?" I go, "Sure." And it was always never going to be something I didn't enjoy doing because Evan was there. Anytime one year we were in Kiowa Island, it was the intersectionals went from Arizona. They would alternate coast every year for a little while. They did, where it was hard out in Arizona, but then it was clay court over there in Kiowa. And we showed up over there and we were playing this team, and I think this team was from Minnesota, I think, or I don't know what region that is, and Evan came over to me and he goes, I just want to let you know that you're getting ready to play some good players. I said, okay. And he goes, this one guy, he played for the University of Minnesota. And I said, okay. And he goes, this other guy played #1 for Wisconsin. I said, okay. And he looked at me and he goes, I got a sense that you're not, that doesn't faze you. I said, oh, it phases me. Don't get me wrong. I said, they're good players, but all I want to know is what have they been doing to update the resume lately? And he's looked at me. And he's looked at me. I said, Evan, I said, I've been playing for 4 or 5 years already, and I've got, but at that time I probably had 3 or 4 national titles, and and I said, I know everybody that's playing right now that's got game, an edge on their game because they've been playing. I said, I'm not fearful of what they, and I thank them for playing college tennis and doing what they could then and then, but I was one of them low guys on the college teams, and now maybe I'm up here alongside them. I don't know. I said, but I'm here to get and give respect wherever it's earned. And he has looked at me. And so me and Paul Groth were playing that team, and Eben was sitting on this lounge chair back behind our court, like you got a little sidewalk, and he's sitting back there. And Paul was serving. And the funniest thing that ever, I cannot imagine, I played with some right-handers in my time, but to play with a true left-hander like Paul Groth is, what I own on a serve with a kick serve, he owns just as equally from the left-handed side. And so
right.
what we both get when we play doubles against people is we get 2 guys on the other side that are just massively confused because they never get a reading on a right or a lefty. They're just getting all this weird crap. And their returns they get some in, but most of the time we're bouncing balls over the back fence. And so I'm sitting there one time, and Paul was serving, and he served the first point, and he comes up to me. I said, "What are you gonna serve?" I'm gonna kick him out wide. I said, "Okay." Well, it's a right-hander, so I'm thinking he might lace one down the alley, and Paul kicks it out wide, and I mean he's just got this juice on it. It's hopping like a Super Bowl. And this guy reaches out and he plucks this lob up in the air, and I go back about 2 steps and just hammer this overhead and go back. And I said, "What are you going to do now?" He goes, "I'm going to slide it out wide to his forehand." I said, to his backhand. I said, "Okay." Sure enough, the guy lobs it up, bang, I bang another overhead. Well, he does it again. And the next time it's in the deuce court again. And I go back and I hit this overhead, and I turn around, and Evan is now not on his chair. He's on the ground like he had fallen out of his chair. It's a lounge chair. And I'm like, "Evan, what are you doing?" And he goes, I'll tell you later. And I didn't know what's going on. Well, later that night in dinner, we're sitting there. I said, "Okay, now you got to break the news to me. What were you doing?" What was so funny? Because, we're all looking to have fun, and if somebody's laughing out of character, by God, I want to know why too. I want to laugh too. Paul went up for that 30-love point, and he served the exact same ball that he had served the first time, and the guy lobbed it up, and he goes, "And I got to tell you, by the time that lob got to your racket, my overhead racket," he goes, "Paul was on the back fence picking up the 3rd ball." And I was like, right. I looked at Paul, and Paul was like, "Well, dude, you've hit 2 pellets that nobody in their mama's going to get in front of, much less return. Why am I going to stay around and play the rest of the point out?" And I said, "Because they might get it back." And he goes, "What a chance is that going to happen?" I was like, "Well, okay, you got me." But Eben was on the ground laughing. I mean, literally, Paul was back there talking to Eben up under the fence. And I was like, "Oh my God, my teammates are just bailing on me, but they're having a blast." And that was what we were all about, was just having a lot of fun,
And making sure the officials had a lot of like-where balls when you guys played, right? Because you were bouncing balls and losing everything, right?
Me and Paul played the senior invitational down at Cherokee for, I don't know how many times we've won it, probably 7 or 8, 9 times, something like that. I'm not one to keep up with those numbers. I remember one of the last years I played, they gave me a jacket for being it was either a dozen or a double-digit winner of events down there. And I know I had won singles 4, so that means me and Paul have probably won a doubles about 7 or 8 times. And I mean, poor Beth Clay down there that runs that tournament, every time we walk on the court, she look at the umpire and go, here's your 2 more cans of balls
Yeah.
because you're gonna need
Yeah.
them. And we just
Right.
laugh. But what do? You just kind of do what you
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah, that's another event here in Atlanta we're very blessed to have is the ASI, the Atlanta Senior Invitational. Just a great tournament.
Yeah,
It's always been fun
it
to
is.
go down and watch some matches. So, Dave, last thing here, when I say this all the time. I mean, we'll put the Georgia Hall of Fame and its members up against any other Hall of Fame
Sure.
in the world of any sport. I mean, we got some amazing people, contributors, great players, coaches. In your case, basically all of that. And thank you for spending some time with us today. So when you got the phone call that you were being inducted into the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame, what was your reaction? And what does the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame mean to you?
Well, I mean, Darren, I've honestly, growing up, I don't know. I guess my dad was a soldier. My mom was a school teacher. Just blue collar, I'd say low end blue collar, working family. You basically were just taught to do what your passion was, and do it at 110%. Otherwise, pick it up and go do something else that you might give 110% at. I was very blessed that Evan called me to tell me. I had no idea that I was even being considered. I don't know who threw my name out there. It could have well been Evan. I don't know. Wouldn't doubt it. Being the person and the gentleman and the friend and to a degree a mentor at times, wouldn't have shocked me. But for him to call me and tell me that I was being inducted, I was glad I was sitting down because it meant a ton, just coming from him, but also knowing the people that are in there. I mean, a lot of the guys I've played with around the state in pro-ams and leagues and stuff, Armistead Neely, Horace Reed. I mean, I just go on and on. Shannon and Bob Nichols that I know, from just being around programs that have always meant tons, as far as just human development, if not, not only just tennis, but human development, period. The company that like I said in my Hall of Fame speech, that the people that I'm getting to be associated with is what people dream of being in association with. And for me to be there, it's kind of still a surreal thing. I do. I hold it, and I kind of jokingly laugh because in the exhibit that's in there, my daughter, I think she's got a picture of her doing the YMCA Tennis Georgia program, and her picture's got to be 2.5 feet tall. Well, she's been over helping this little kid, and to me, that's more important to me that the people like this young man in the picture that you put up on the podcast or on the cast here. Those people are the ones that, just as much as I do, maybe I coordinated it and knew them to, draw them in, but they have the same ideas and the same morals and values that I try to exude every day when I teach or play or walk this earth. And to know that I'm in the accompaniment of all these great tennis players, Armistead, oh my God, I saw Armistead Neely play when I was about 14 years old in Florida. He didn't even know I was there. He was playing Buster Brown in a match at a club that his dad owned. And I was walking by to get my racket restrung, and I just stopped to watch for a few minutes, which turned into 2 hours. And I've been, when I went to the Italian Cup in '95, Armistead and his wife were over there, and oh my gosh, we had just a blast. I mean, it was like a party on another planet somewhere. But that's just those people that they didn't know it, but as my little learning eyes always focused on what were they doing right and what were they doing wrong. They didn't know it, but they were leading me to be a bigger and better person. And to now be alongside them in the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame is just, it still blows my mind to even think that, I'm lucky to just be there. That's it,
Well, I personally want to thank you for all you've done and continue to do. I think it's great you're still in tennis with the David Mathews Tennis Academy, being such a great role model and leader for our next generation of tennis players and leaders. So, David, thank you so much today for spending some time with us.
I do want to say one last thing that, my academy, we did shut down out here we were in Stone Mountain last, but I am up at Beaufort City Park with a great lady up there. Jane Hunter is the director up there. It's a little public parks program in Beaufort City. We've got about 125 kids. So, and I've got some, tournament players that are up in that top 100, moving up past that, got a couple up around 50. So, I've kind of moved a little bit out of the limelight for a while, but be careful because, big guys do resurface occasionally too. So it's a lot of fun to stay in the game and watch these kids grow. That to me is what it's always been about anyway.
Yeah, and appropriately nicknamed Big Dog. Ladies and gentlemen, that's David Mathews, class of 2013 in the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame. Thanks so much for joining us today. Look for our next episode shortly. Thanks for watching.